I am very pleased to be joined by Juhani van Halle, who's the managing director at Siili Auto, and Bartosz Taczala, the technical lead at Siili Auto. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start off the conversation looking at an overview of the medical industry, why we're here, how CUTE plays in the medical industry. Then I'll be handing it off to Juhani, excuse me, and he'll be talking a little bit about their kind of what they do at Siili and how they've converged on this wonderful POC concept, which is a medical concept, but they're definitely expanding into medical, but definitely have a focus in automotive, which is kind of the trend these days. And then Bartosz will then dive into the actual POC and show you what they did and go through a little bit of the technology and how it was developed. So first, I've been with the CUTE company for about 3 years. I've done numerous speaking sessions, both on CUTE webinars, at different types of speaking sessions at trade shows and conferences. And so many of you may have seen this slide already. And one of the things that I constantly do as a product manager here for the CUTE company is checking in with our users, our customers, our developers, and just making sure I understand what value they're getting out of the CUTE, especially as it applies to the medical industry. So some of these things, again, for those of you who have joined me before, these are kind of, you might have seen, but just to quickly go through, the ability to create safe, effective, reliable, and intuitive user experiences with uncompromising performance and reliability, developing the best user-adopted, efficient user experiences with our design tools and being able to rapidly prototype on the target device. This rapid prototyping is going to be a theme for today across what I talk about and what Juhani and Bartosz are going to talk about. Also, as you all know, CUTE is a UI UX cross-platform development environment. So any type of hardware, operating system, code once, deploy everywhere. We're also a development platform that's been embedded into FDA Class 1, 2, and 3 and EU certified Class 1, 2A, 2B, and 3 medical devices currently on the market. We've also been deployed into medical devices outside of US and EU. But for those of you who are familiar with the regulatory environment, a lot of the ministries of health really look at the FDA or the US and the EU regulatory environment as kind of the template, the best practice, and a lot of the other ministries of health kind of pattern their regulatory market clearances after the FDA and the EU. But what this says is that we've been in the lowest risk to the highest risk type of products all across the globe, and we've been built into medical devices since about the mid-90s. Actually, an ultrasound device was one of the first devices that CUTE was built into. We do provide, at the CUTE company, provide documentation transparency into our development process, product performance, validation. This is in order to help support your device compliance needs, whether it's standard certifications or regulatory market clearances. And then, when we say get to market faster, we have the best-in-class technology, full tooling support to help you develop faster, but also leveraging our industry-leading partnerships in which Siili is a really premier partner of the QT company, and you'll hear from them in a little bit. Okay, so why are we here? What's all the interest and the hype in these types of ventilators? Well, as we all know, we've been through a global pandemic since the beginning of the year. Extreme measures have been taken across the globe to keep people safe. And, some of the SARS-CoV-2 symptoms, many of you may know by heart by now, with all the news and how, we've been keeping in touch with, what exactly is this virus. And the problematic areas of this virus, as you look at the symptoms are, the cough, the shortness of breath and difficulty breathing, and the fatigue. This all leads to, respiratory difficulty, respiratory distress. And the mortality rate, the deaths, are kind of circled around and focused on the difficulty in breathing, the pneumonia that comes when, you know, people who are at high risk or having issues with the disease and are really affected by it. It's really around the respiratory area. So the emergency warning signs are the trouble breathing, the persistent pain and pressure in the chest, the confusion because of the lack of oxygen you're getting to your brain, the inability to wake or stay awake, and obviously the bluish lips. This is all, you know, oxygen deprivation that these sufferers are experiencing, which need a ventilator, which require a ventilator. So the current needs, you know, are different now, though. You know, we're seeing this curve being flattened across the globe, right? So the flattening of the curve throughout Asia, Europe, and the Americas means that, you know, the ventilators are no longer in short supply. When we were at full flare with this pandemic in Asia, in Europe, and in the United States, you know, when we're getting to that peak of that curve, there was a supply shortage of ventilators and that demand was going up. So it was a scramble to get new ventilators. But now, with the curve flattening, with the hospital admissions coming down, the demand for ventilators is decreasing. Now, how was this need filled? This is an important question because I think there was some misconception. Ventilator manufacturers increased the manufacturing of ventilators already approved for market across the globe, meaning new technology like this, with very, and when I say this, you can look at the picture to the right, new types of technology like this with very modern user interfaces and user experiences, brand new technology being brought to the market really wasn't the focus here. The focus was looking at the products that already were approved for market across the globe. And what happened was there was manufacturing resources leveraged from industries outside of the medical device industry, including the automotive industry. You know, big news that GM was helping. Actually, you know, there were other industries like the fitness industry that were actually helping make ventilators. But these ventilators, again, already had market approval with the FDA, the EU, or ministries of health around the world. Why? Because the regulatory process for new devices takes time, even in the most expedited situations. So the curve is flattened. So why are we still talking about ventilators? Why is this an important session for people to sit in on? And the reason for looking at new ways to modernize, to develop these type of ventilators quickly is because the demand for ventilators increased in response to the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic. They found out that pulling these ventilators out of backroom supply or backroom storage, that these were older technologies. These weren't very intuitive and they were difficult to use. And then what they also found were these ventilators were big and clunky. They weren't very portable. And when you're trying to turn emergency rooms or you know, areas outside of an emergency room or outside an ICU to facilitate the big, you know, increase of patients coming in, you need this portability, and they weren't very portable. So they found out that in, you know, trying to bring this type of healthcare and this type of care to patients, that there was a need for more modern ventilators that are truly portable with intuitive UI UX that really mimic your experience on your smartphone. Looking at the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic, that's not the only, you know, kind of need that we have here. Okay, certainly the one that was the biggest in the news, certainly probably the one that caught your attention to join this webinar. But, you know, the other thing I do as a product manager is I look to solve people's problems. I look to solve developers' problems, customers' problems who are building these types of devices. And when I talk to them, you know, and they're considering a company like Qt, a technology like Qt that has commercial off-the-shelf software, when they're considering bringing on a third-party development arm like Siili, you know, what are the concerns that they have in trying to vet, in trying to judge whether a vendor or a supplier, you know, is of quality? And there's three areas: clinical risk, that would be the risk that a product will not work as intended; human factors risk, the risk that a product will not be used as intended; and of course, cybersecurity risk, the risk that a product can be hacked or compromised. What we try to do is work with our customers to support and create solutions for each of these three, you know, kind of concerns or or risk areas. So what we're going to focus on, and what I think really is going to come out of this talk, as well as, you know, the kind of like the demand for ventilators and how it's been, and what I discussed in the first couple of slides, is that we also look at the human factors risk. Building prototypes early and often helps facilitate and mitigate the human factors risk. And that is a risk that a product will not be used as intended. Well, you know, and I always put this out in my talks and talking about this type of methodology is, you know, what is the value of a product working as intended, clinically working as intended, if it cannot be used as intended? And that human factors is very critical. And so just to talk about what human factors and human factors analysis is, there are three main goals. You know, you want to understand how the device will be used. You want to drive a design that matches the capabilities and limitations of the users, and discover use areas and eliminate them. And how is this accomplished is, you know, there's use error and task analysis, early prototyping, usability evaluation. This is where building a prototype early, quickly, easily can really help. Formal usability testing, and then post-market usability studies and/or surveys. Each is necessary but not sufficient. Together, they form a foundation for the development of a safe and usable system. So here's kind of the flow chart when we're looking at the development and the solution. You know, what we want to do is create this workflow where you're designing a UI UX and it's ready for some user testing. And that user testing would be early. And then the user testing reveals that some of the elements work, some of them don't. We want to redesign those elements that don't work. And then when you get down to the formal human factors testing, it reveals that UI UX elements that won't work even further down, you know, the development chain. So we want to be able to iterate and work and do this feedback loop. And then finally, be able to finalize and report. Building prototypes easily, quickly, is paramount to facilitating this. So how does Qt make it easier to iteratively prototype? You know, obviously, knowing Qt, we have pre-built libraries enabling drag and drop. What you see is what you get development. Also, Qt design tools and our Qt Design Studio help facilitate this kind of iteratively prototyping and redesign. But the rapid prototyping on a target device is really, really important. And that's kind of what we're showing today, kind of showing that you can build a proof of concept, a prototype very easily and quickly, iterate that through your user base and your advisory people, advisory users that will give you feedback, and then iterate on that prototype and continue to evolve it to drive to the best adoptable design. So again, rapidly prototyping on the target device, iterate quickly, identify issues early and easily. Prototyping is in real space within the actual environment. That way you can correct form factor, correct resolution, correct the look and feel. You can identify the actual issues, prioritize and triage the issues to be fixed. So with that, that's my little introduction. I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Juhani to dive into more about what Siili does, and we're going to drive towards looking at that proof of concept. So Juhani, take it away.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you for the good insights to medical marketing. Let me get this my sharing up. So yeah, as Roger mentioned earlier, I come from a company, Siili Auto. We are a premium service partner with Qt, so we are really happy to be talking also in this webinar with Qt. As the company name says, yeah, we are working with the automotive industry a lot, and that's where we kind of started. But where we are really specialized in is the HMI development of digital user interfaces. So, and that's an area which is common with many industries, including medical, but also home appliances and various industries. So the skills what we've and the experience what we've gathered in the automotive industry are directly applicable also in the medical side. I'm going to talk specifically about this rapid prototyping and how we have seen that being a critical piece of accelerating the product development especially for the HMI development, and how that helps in the design process. But before going into that, little bit kind of a background that what inspired us into getting into this kind of exercise with the proof of concept. So like Roger mentioned earlier, the COVID-19 really increased the need for these ventilators, and we were also approached by companies that were not necessarily on that market before, but they were looking into using some of the technologies what they had already in house and trying to find ways to really fast develop ventilators. But like Roger said, that there are some issues or some kind of timing factors with the regulatory processes that are making it difficult. But nevertheless, companies were interested in that. But this is, I mean, not only a interest in the COVID-19 pandemic, but for any company that is developing products, the time to market is important, and the less time you spend on the R&D, the less money you spend on that development. So, and the faster you can react to changing market conditions, so the better, and that's why speeding up the product development is always important for companies. And one of the key beliefs what we have in there, that prototyping is the tool to use. So when you start from a design that is in PowerPoints, the features may be well described and the screens defined in there, but you cannot test PowerPoint. You may start with steps like building or drawing those UI elements to pieces of paper, and then start organizing those on a table to find out how to fit them on the screen. Or you may also make some digital prototypes where you can get the functionality right there, but the look and feel of the UIs is completely different. Those have their place in this prototyping world, but what we believe is that to truly test the user experience in the device, you have to get the actual designs into the faces of the users in the real target environment as fast as possible, because the details of those usability issues only come up when you have the actual screen size of the target device and the actual performance of the target device, and then you can test the say different gestures, how they work in there, and so forth. And this is particularly important in the medical devices where the intuitive user interface is really crucial, and you need to make sure that it's really difficult to make errors with the user interface. So the sooner you get that into the design process, the better, because then you can do the iterations cheaper in the early stages of the design rather than towards the end of the product development cycle in there. So doing this high fidelity prototyping as part of the design process is speeding up the design cycle by providing these rapid iterations and weekly user tests, and giving the feedback to the design teams what is working and what is not. What we've seen, what types of prototypes are typically used, or for what purpose? Of course, you can prototype and test whether a new feature that you are thinking of is at all needed in the market. But then if you have a existing product, let's say that it has physical knobs and buttons and maybe some static and numeric screens in it, and then you want to move to a fully graphical user interface and touch-based user interface, there are lots of usability related issues that you need to test. For instance, is it better to have soft buttons on the screen that mimic the hardware buttons, or would it be best to go with kind of a smartphone, like a gesture-based user interface where you navigate between screens by swiping it and so forth. You can also prototype and test the technical feasibility. Do you get the needed quality from the screen within the budget what you have, or can you integrate the needed connectivity elements into the device? You can prototype performance. Is the scrolling fast enough, or can you get the waveforms smoothly running in the device? And as a fifth type of a prototype, what we've seen is this workflow prototype, which is a little bit different. It's more about how do you get your team to be able to test the feature in end-to-end manner. So going straight from design to target hardware. So that's where we oftentimes kind of work with our clients, that we have this prototyping team as part of the design team, or working hand in hand with the design team to kind of get those designs into the target environment on a weekly basis. Some of the questions what we get from our clients that are typically answered by these prototypes is that, how do I reduce human errors with the use of my device? So if you have found a particular area in the user interface that is causing problems, then you can build, especially with this kind of digital HMIs, it's easy to build different variants of the feature and then do testing between different versions of it to find out where the errors are less likely to happen. You can also prototype that what's the best set of physical controls to operate the HMI in the device, and what should be as part of the graphical user interface, and so forth. So all these questions on the right hand side are possible to answer with the prototyping. And over the years, when we've done this with our clients, a few kind of a good characteristics of a prototype that we've noticed is that one is that you have to be able to change the test scenarios with simple configuration in the prototype, so that you don't need to rebuild every time when you try to test something different. Oftentimes it's also there are different user groups with slightly different backgrounds or different needs, and they're using the device differently. So you need to be able to customize the displayed content per the user and the user group, so that it tests the scenarios what they want to or that they typically use in the device. The iterations, so we have proven that you can do those iterations in less than 1 week cycles, even with high fidelity prototypes. And actually, when Bartosz is showing what we did with the ventilator concept, what he's showing is it was done in less than 2 days in there. So this is really important that you have these fast iterations, because then it maximizes the input what you get from the user testing. And then there are, of course, these recordings of how the user is testing or using the device or the prototype, so that you can make analytics of what features were difficult to find in that, or generate heat maps where the user is spending most of its time, or you can even use cameras to monitor the user's eye movement and determine from where the user is looking for the features, and if he's not finding those, then determine where those, or where the problem areas are in the user interface. So now moving closer to the actual case example, what we had. So as discussed earlier, so this COVID-19 and the need for the ventilators was inspiring us to kind of start prototyping in that area. And why did we choose Qt for MCUs as the platform to do that on? Well, there were few kind of characteristics or strong points in the Qt for MCUs that was a good fit for this. One is that it supports the right kind of hardware, which is like a low power consumption, relatively affordable hardware, where you can develop software with really low software footprint. So this is also one important aspect when you're building medical devices, is that you don't have any extra software in there. You only have the software that you need to run the device, so that when you go into the testing and verification of the software, you have a limited number of software to test, and then the smaller number of lines of code that you have, the smaller chance there is that there are errors then in the code. And also the design tools are really good for Qt for MCU. So we used Qt Designer, for instance, in this exercise. So that's also a good reason for using it for fast prototyping. So we were actually approached by a company that had an existing ventilator product, but they needed to do a design change there, where the processing unit had to be changed to a lower power consumption version, and actually the existing solution was built with the full Qt release in there, and it had a powerful processor in it, and they wanted to explore whether Qt for MCUs would enable some low power consumption hardware to be used. So this was kind of a starting point for our exercise here, and we set a goal that, okay, let's now test if we start from a clean table and start building with Qt for MCUs. Can we get the first user interface prototype running on the target environment in this 5-day cycle? And that's where Bartosz and our designer kind of kicked off the activity and started building this POC that Bartosz is going to show in a few minutes. And as you will see, then this was easily achieved to be in this 5-day cycle. So since it only took a couple of days to get the POC, or the first prototype, running on the target environment, and so that proved that yes, this platform was a feasible alternative for this platform change for that potential client of ours. And from here, actually, I then hand over to Bartosz. So if you could maybe show in practice what was it that we implemented and your experiences on how it was to implement that.
Okay, thanks. Right, so I will share my screen, and I will, while talking, I will be sharing with you guys a video of what we actually did, and the video is available on YouTube, and the links will be included in the presentation, so you can also watch it afterwards. So as Juhani mentioned, we were approached by a customer that had an existing respirator UI or respirator product. And so the challenge that he was facing, as Juhani also explained, is that he wanted to investigate a possible switch from the high power CPU to a low power CPU. So the board that the customer was working with had a dual core big little architecture, and the customer wanted to make a switch from Cortex A to Cortex R. And the question that we've received was is it actually possible to create a simple UI that can run on the Cortex R? How long will it take to actually create a UI, and how long will it take to actually develop that on the target hardware? Next question was whether the customer could utilize the tools that Qt already provides to support Qt development. Right, so specifically Qt Design Studio and Qt Designer, right? So the customer was pretty familiar with both tools, and the design teams were pretty familiar with those tools. And the question was whether the Qt for MCU also supports them, and if so, how well. So we didn't want to simply answer the questions and hope for the best. We actually wanted to verify our statements. We know we were working with Qt for MCU for a longer time. We know that it's possible to create a smooth and fancy UI in a couple of days, but we wanted to showcase that yes, this is possible, and yes, we can do that in a couple of days. And the customer could also do that in a couple of days with using of Qt Design Studio and other Qt tools. So we do have a very talented design team with a lot of experience in designing smooth and fancy instrument cluster and IVI concepts, and we wanted to have a little to make the UI a bit more fancy and a bit more complex than the simple couple of buttons that the customer wanted, right? So actually I was limiting our design team in terms of what's possible, what's not possible, given the low power characteristic of the hardware, right? So initially we came up with a very fancy 3D design, but I said, no, that's not possible, right? You have to scale it down a bit. I did have at that time I did have an NXP 1170 board on my desk, so we decided that we could actually use this board to present the UI that you guys are seeing on the videos to the customer, right? The CPU that we've used is a Cortex M7, which is slightly more powerful than target Cortex R. However, we thought that if we could achieve 60 frames per second with this more complicated UI, we could definitely aim for 30 frames per second, and with a simpler UI on Cortex R. And so we started the design phase. We actually did most of the design in Qt Design Studio. We initially hoped that we could develop entire application in Qt Design Studio, but due to some hardware-related issues, that wasn't the case. And due to COVID-19 outbreak and us working from home, I wasn't able to actually share the hardware with our design team. But this actually showed one of the many features of Qt for MCU, is that you could target there's a backend desktop. There's a backend desktop backend for Qt for MCU. So our design team could actually install SDK and use Qt for MCU on their machines, right? So they didn't have to actually have a hardware. They could design their design in Design Studio and then compile them and run it on their devices. And as I mentioned, we weren't able to actually develop everything in Qt Design Studio as we initially hoped. That was the reason was that NXP 1170 comes with a screen that supports only vertical rotation, not horizontal. So in order for us to achieve this horizontal design, we had to manually rotate all the assets by 90 degrees and reposition them on the screen. And this was the only manual work that we had to do. Other than that, everything was designed in Qt Design Studio. And also our designers helped me in terms of developing controls. So the controls were fully developed in Design Studio, and I had most of the controls I had just to pick and plug it into our binary. We did have some, we also had to do some manual image optimizations because at that time NXP 1170 support was only preliminary. So yeah, so some manual asset optimization was needed. And also, as you can see in the video, our charts component is static. This is because, so this is an image, and this was because Qt charts was not fully supported in Qt for MCU at that time. They are now. So if we would do the demo again, we would definitely use Qt charts and have a more interactive charts there. So the final result was a smooth UI that runs around 50 to 60 frames per second. So there is a long animation going on when, so the lungs are animated. And so we wanted to actually change the opacity and the scale to actually test the hardware performance of this board. So we wanted to have two effects that are really nice to see, but did not overkill the board itself. We are dropping to 30 frames per second if we are doing some other animations. But yeah, this is something that we are really happy with. The performance was close to what we would like, considering that 1170 support was only initial at that point, and it was not finalized. As I mentioned, due to hardware problems, we couldn't utilize Qt Design Studio to fully design and implement all the UI. Some manual work was needed. Yeah, but in the end, I think that the scenario where you can easily develop, or you can fully develop your UI with Qt Design Studio is possible if you have a hardware platform that doesn't have those quirks like 1170 did have. Right, and so this was almost the end of our proof of concept. But since this is since Qt for MCU is fully compatible with Qt upstream version, we actually ported our proof of concept to iPad. We wanted to have a slightly more powerful board, and we also wanted to have our sales team being able to showcase the demo to our customers and not bring MCUs with them, right? So this is what we this is the version for iPad, and by ported I mean actually we used Qt Design Studio to fully implement this port, and by implementing I mostly mean not rotate images and do not do any hacks with images. And that was it. So the port was done in a couple of hours. So a couple of observations from our side during this exercise. Qt Design Studio is really helpful, right? So we could, even though we couldn't implement whole application UI in Qt Design Studio given the hardware problems that we had, most of the components were actually designed in Qt Design Studio, and they were actually developed by our design team. So our designers are pretty familiar with Qt Design Studio, and they are pretty comfortable with working at that, and they really value it for its content, right? So it's really easy for them to create something, UI components, and then I can just take them and plug them into a final binary. And this definitely increased our development speed. If we had to do everything manual, I don't think that we would make it under 5 days or so. Qt for MCU supports backend, desktop backends, as I mentioned. So it's not necessary. It wasn't a necessity for us to provide hardware to our designers. They could actually design and see their designs in a real application. Obviously, when the final solution was baked, I've shared the hardware with our design team, and they made some small color adjustments, right? Because of the screen quality. And also so one thing that we also learned, and we need to stress, is that our design team make of the first design that we did was over the top, and we needed to make sure that our design team is aware of hardware capabilities, right? So 3D stuff, or running very heavy animations, like animating various properties at the same time, may be an overkill for the board itself. One thing that we were really amazed by is the boot time. So the Qt, the proof of concept for MCU actually had a lesser boot time than iPad one, right? So on MCU we could start more quickly than from cold boot than on iOS from application launcher, which was really amazing, and we thought that that's insane. And given Qt for MCU internal implementation, the code size with all the assets being included in the binary, we think that Qt for MCU does extremely great job in optimizing asset size and producing a binary that's small and very fast to actually load. And so this all is reflected in boot time. As far as I remember correctly, we did achieve boot time under 200 milliseconds, which is really great and really something that we really like. So that's it from my side. Roger, can you take over?
Yeah, if you stop sharing your screen, I'll reshare mine. Yeah. Thanks, Bartosz. That was excellent. Let's go ahead back here to where I left off. And so before I get into this, there's a couple of things that I'd like to make you folks aware of before we jump into the Q&A. But one thing that Bartosz had said, Qt for MCU is a rather new offering for us, for the Qt company, as well as, Design Studio is relatively new now as well. And Design Studio originally, when it was originally launched, was really, integrated very tightly and compatible with the core Qt, and traditional Qt framework. But now that we've scaled down to the MCU level, we are making the Design Studio more and more compatible in our successful releases with the MCU product. So, very interesting. I find how, Siili and Bartosz and his team, use Design Studio the way it was with how far we got it into the MCU product at the time. And certainly appreciate him communicating that it did help, although it wasn't fully integrated. Also, we're also with the MCU product, we've had, initially just some boards that were reference boards initially, but we're adding boards, with each that we're supporting with each successive release as well. But in saying that, I think it's very interesting the way, Siili was still able to use Design Studio with the MCU, even though the board wasn't really the one of the out-of-the-box supported boards, and certainly, still bringing the the Design Studio product up to the MCU level and making it fully integrated. So great stuff. Just want to let everybody know that there is a Qt for MCU training program that will happen on June 24th. This will be run by our partners here at Siili. It's going to be a 5-hour session, so very, immersed into the technology. And over to the left here, you'll see, some of the things that we're looking for folks to get out of it. you know, you will, yes, there will be today's session with the links to the videos and everything will be provided to you once the session is over. So the sign up link down here is where you would go to try to take advantage of this. And again, before jumping into the Q&A, you know, you can always contact the Qt company or contact us, Siili, through their website. The videos that Bartosz used showing the POC for the MCU ventilator can be found in these two links here. You can learn more about Qt for MCUs at this link, more about our offering for the medical industry here. I would be the person that you can reach out to directly if you'd like to learn more about that as well. And then our social media kind of links. All right, gentlemen, ready to jump into some Q&A. So I'll start off reading the first answer, the first question. I think, Bartosz, this might be for you. So the question is, where does all the data shown on the UI come from? Some randomizer model running with the app. How much more work is needed to connect the UI to real data on the device?
Right. So okay. So let me answer that as quickly as I can.
Okay.
So yes, all the data are randomized. Within our proof of concept, we didn't want to focus on the data itself. We wanted to focus on creating UI only. So we did that, and so that the data are randomized. How much time, how much more work is needed to connect the UI to real data on the device? So that actually depends on the device you have. I did a talk at Qt Virtual Summit about using Qt for MCU in slightly more complicated application where the real data is actually being could be used. So in this specific hardware where we have a dual core architecture, we could easily specify that one core is responsible only for data, and the other core is only responsible for UI. And then we would have to provide some way of communicating between cores. But connecting the UI with the real data on the device in terms of exposing data to Qt for MCU or Qt Quick is not that difficult. It's fully documented in Qt for MCU documentation on Hospital and Qt.io. So yeah, so connecting real data to Qt for MCU UI based approach is documented. So it's just a matter of question how to actually extract the data and how to pass them to the UI.
Fantastic. And just for everybody's knowledge, the Qt Virtual TechCon sessions are actually, you can find them and look at the on-demand sessions, so the recorded sessions, and you can find that on our website. So if you have interest in looking at and checking out what Bartosz did during our Virtual TechCon, certainly you can. Okay, so next one. This is a very interesting way of quickly implementing a UI concept study. Tried to download the code and compile the source project, but I don't have ultralight version and want to ask if it's possible to find an open source version or a trial version of the MCU. Yes, we can do an evaluation version of the MCU product. Emmanuel asked that question. Emmanuel, I'm going to verbally give out my email address so you can shoot me a quick message. I'll get you to the right person to get you an evaluation. So my email address is my first name, Roger, R-O-G-E-R, dot Mazzella, M-A-Z-Z-E-L-L-A, so 2 Z's, 2 L's in the last name, at qt.io. Happy to help you and connect you with the right person. We can get you a trial version to do that. Next question. What tool, okay, and this might be again, for Bartosz, what tool does your design team use to create UI assets, and how are they imported into Design Studio? So I can tell you that before Bartosz gives his answer, Design Studio has 2 bridges from Photoshop and from Sketch. We're adding more bridges. I think Adobe XD is next, but those bridges mean that you kind of implement the bridge into Photoshop. And once you have your Photoshop design done, you simply press a button and it imports it into into Design Studio. Now that is for Photoshop and Sketch. You know, Bartosz, I'm not sure what, you know, because people use different design elements as well outside of that. Maybe you can let us know what you did and how you got those design elements imported into the Design Studio and the product.
Yeah. Okay. So so actually, that's a great question, but unfortunately, I have no idea. I'm not I'm not designer myself, but I do. I think that our design team is using Photoshop as well as other tools. So I would place my bet on Photoshop, but
Okay.
I don't know for 100%.
Yeah, and this question was from Tom. So Tom, you know, we'll follow up. What I'll do is I'll take this question back with me, and we'll talk about it. I'll investigate with Bartosz, and you know, we can get you a better answer to see exactly what they use. But again, you know, already built into Design Studio are these bridges that, you know, take you from you know, the design you're doing in actually Design Studio and Sketch, Photoshop and Sketch, I apologize, Photoshop and Sketch, and directly imports them into Design Studio. The idea is to, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We didn't want to, you know, put another tool out there that was another design tool outside of Photoshop and Sketch. We wanted to let your designers, your you know, artists, to be able to work in the environments that they're comfortable in, and then leverage and utilize the Design Studio product to facilitate that quickly getting into, you know, the design into the code. Okay, great. Next question, I think might be, we might get Juhani involved in this one. So I think this might be for you, Juhani. High fidelity is usually made in a final product, which takes time. How do you balance the development time versus high fidelity in rapid prototyping?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, for high fidelity is usually, well, the end product hopefully is high fidelity, that you don't have too high level design in there. Well, there are a few I guess important points in there. One is in the in your application architecture, the user interface and the backend should be really well decoupled, so that you can build the user interface in isolation and then also have that tested in isolation. So you basically just mock everything that you have in the backend with the test data that you need for the test cases. And for the fast prototyping, I mean, it should be noted that the idea is not to build the whole application user interface for those. So for planning those prototypes, you need to plan them together with the test cases that you want to verify in there. So oftentimes you need only a small portion of the application's full user interface where you can exercise those particular items that you want to get the test data on. So it's a small slice of the application at the time. But then for each iteration that you're doing on a weekly basis, you may choose a different set of functionality in there. Then the last one is really to use this kind of take full advantage of the tools that are in use, Design Studio and the design tools what you have in there. So yeah, based on our experience, it is actually not that much additional work to make high fidelity design in there over kind of a cruder design in there.
Okay. Bartosz, we might be back to you. We have time for maybe one or two more questions. I'm not sure if they wrote this down correctly, and this might be a little bit of a mistype, but the display is an NXP 1117. I think it was 1170, right? But I'm not sure.
Yeah, 1170.
Yeah, and the target chip on the board was, and maybe there was some confusion. Maybe they didn't hear it right. So they want to know what the target chip on the board was with the 1170.
So the target chip was Cortex M7.
Okay. Okay, great. Next one might be for you. Lung animations were done via transitions or a GIF PNG image dedicated to the job. Usually things like this kill the FPS. So lung animations were done via transitions, or were they done via transitions or a GIF PNG image dedicated to the job? Usually these things don't kill the frame per second. Sorry.
Okay, so what we've done is we actually have the same image for each lung, and then we actually scale it up and down and change opacity slightly. So the animation is on scale property, and we don't change the image source, right? So we actually only animate on scale. And as you could see, and you can see on YouTube, and you can find it on yourself, it doesn't kill the CPU.
Okay.
So with lungs animation, we did reach a constant 50-60 frames per second.
Okay. Okay, great. Awesome. And I think this one's going to be the final question, and I think I can take this one myself. What would the effort be to port the app to another MCU board? Actually, Bartosz, you might be able to take this too. I could just say that, from my standpoint, and Bartosz, I'll let you weigh in on this too. Depending from a Qt standpoint, it depends if the board is a validated reference board that we have in our lineup, or if it's something outside of the boards that we support currently. And certainly we're, from the Qt standpoint, from a product standpoint, we certainly have customers that want to explore other boards. We certainly encourage that, but there is a little bit of a professional service that we could provide to help you port that to another board if you need that help. And that takes some time. So I think the boards that are already out of the box, reference boards ready to go, are certainly easier. But Bartosz, I'll let you weigh in on that as well.
Right. So with this specific Pro concept, and given the board that I actually had on my desk, so the reason why we selected 1170 is NXP 1170 is just because I had this board on my desk, right? And I was actually working on implementing support for Qt for MCU for this particular board, right? And so given this board, and given the problem with the screen itself, where we had to actually rotate every asset and reposition that on the screen, if we had a normal board that doesn't suffer from this issue, you could easily transfer the UI design between different boards, right? So essentially what you could do is you could end up with one UI and target various boards that are actually support for Qt for MCU. And we are doing that with our other projects based on Qt for MCU, where we don't necessarily have all the target hardware. Our engineers don't necessarily have all the hardware needed, but they have different target that's supported by Qt for MCU. So we actually are doing that. So we develop applications that are desired for one target, but we test them on different boards because of lack of hardware or other reasons, right? So yeah. It's so the Qt motto is code once, deploy everywhere. This also fits Qt for MCU case.
Excellent. And we're about 2 minutes left, and I have one more question regarding MCU technology. It's a pretty involved question. Emmanuel, I'm sorry. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one offline, and we'll respond separately, because we are about 2 minutes left to the session, and we'll get to this question. We'll answer it offline. Personally, this is the second webinar we did. We did a webinar this morning or this morning my time, for the European and Asia locations. Bartosz, Juhani, thank you very much. This was really a great working with you on this webinar, and wonderful work that you're doing, and always a pleasure working with you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Christine, I'll hand it over to you for some final remarks.
Thank you for this, Roger, Bartosz, and Juhani, and thank you all very much for joining our our live webinar this morning and asking all your interactive questions. We will be ending the webinar, but if you have additional questions for your projects, we are more than happy to answer them. Please contact us via our website at qt.io/contact-us. We look forward to connecting with you soon, and we will now be ending the webinar. Thank you.